No sports, no rock, no information. For mindless chatter, we're your station.
The Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast promises never to make a Jordan 1 knockoff. Welcome, episode 1 of the Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for following me on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at SockJig if you haven't already. So, 3 years ago, I started a Twitter account, and 3 years later, I'm selling socks and starting a podcast. I wanted to say thank you to everyone who reached out and had nice comments and retweeted my teaser episode. I will have guests eventually. I just need to get some reps in and figure this out, get into the flow a bit. A couple of days ago, I didn't know anything about editing or audio mixing or what any of this entails. Basically, I bought a mic and I plugged it in and I said, I'm starting a podcast. So I'm basically a cliche. So I appreciate you, everyone tuning in and choosing to listen. Shout out to the podcasts that have had me on as a guest, the Sneak Disc podcast, One-on-One with Don Drew, the Soul Savvy podcast. Those are all great podcasts. I think they provide a little bit different content what I think I can provide here. So that's one of the main reasons I decided to start one, because I have things to say. Sometimes I can't always expand on them on Twitter. I like talking about resale and buying sneakers online, the process of buying it. But this is not really going to be a podcast about giving tips on how to resell. There's other places and people for that. When I started my Twitter account, I was thinking, I'm not seeing the content that I want to see online on Twitter, so let me just create it. So that's all. That's how we got here. That's how we got to the point of having this podcast. I just want to do my own thing in my own lane, things that I think are interesting or fun, and just totally do it my way. I was once called Sneaker Twitter's independent reporter, and that's probably a little bit true, just because of that. I just want to do my own thing. I don't want to be a guy who runs bots or has a cook group or has an affiliation with someone or something. I'm only in this for things that I like, and that's usually the sneakers themselves. The name Sock Jig comes from the method of buying sneakers online by adding socks to your cart and using that to bypass any queues, which is mostly dead these days, but the name remains. I never really got into botting because I was just after my personal size 12, and that was usually easy enough to get anyways. I figured out ways to get it. And the other reason was, even when I did look into it, most of the bots back then, like 3-4 years ago, didn't even support Canadian billing with US shipping, which is what I usually did. Now the border's closed, so I haven't been doing that lately. But that's what mostly people here in Vancouver do, is they ship to Washington State and they drive across and pick up their sneakers and drive it back to Canada. So back in the day, that's what I was doing. I'll get into more about myself and some of the reasons why in future episodes. But in the first episode here, today, I wanted to talk about two things. I wanted to talk about that Packer New Balance 992 drop, and I also wanted to talk about the Cactus Plant Flea Market Air Force One drop and all the cancels and why they canceled. Okay, the first topic I want to talk about is the Packer 992 collab with New Balance. Actually, it's not a collab. It's actually an exclusive colorway. Joe Grondin was on the Complex podcast earlier last week, and he's head of collabs for New Balance. It's actually a very good listen. He's very forthcoming and, pretty honest. He gave a lot of good insight. He said things like that they watch resale prices very closely, that they check site numbers, at how many people went to the site and how many people tried to check out. He gave a couple insights when they're working with retailers or designers, sometimes politics are in play. For the Bodega No Bad Days collab, he had said that stock was around 1,000 pairs. So when Joe was talking about the actual the Packer release, he explicitly said that it's not a collab, that it's an exclusive colorway, and that the difference is that it's not co-branded, meaning it doesn't say Packer anywhere on the shoe, even though they may have worked together and picked all the colors and generally collaborated on what it should look like. The recent New Balance releases that are collabs are the Double Taps one, and there's even a Pata 920 coming out. Those are considered collabs because they do say it. And stock is probably generally higher on those. No one really knows, but that's what I kind of wanted to talk about here. The ones that are kind of exclusive colorways are like the Joe Fresh Good ones, this Packer one, and even these Kith ones that really recently released the CL colorways. Joe also said that this release started around in January when the initial talks for it. And the difference here is that exclusive colorways could be made in the NB1 factory, which is the New Balance equivalent of Nike ID, which is a factory in the USA, because the 992s are marketed as made in the USA. And Packer said this in their IG post as well. They said, the amazing team at NB1 presented us with the opportunity to design our exclusive version of the made in the USA New Balance 992 to be mass produced and made available as a Packer exclusive. It's pretty interesting that they said mass produced here, because that's kind of what I want to talk about, is the stock numbers for this exclusive colorway. So the release for these were online only on September 12th. Packer site uses bot protection, so everyone is expecting that there would be a question that you'd have to answer, and that because they have bot protection with a question, that you would have a pretty good chance to buy it manually. So on release, the question was, what year was New Balance founded? This is a question that I knew instantly. I didn't have to Google this. I knew it was 1906, and I'm just a nerd like that who remembers this kind of stuff. I added it to cart. I went through. I tripped up on one of the CAPTCHAs where, I clicked a bicycle wrong, and then I had to do it again and pick fire hydrants, and I got through. I'm size 12. I got all the way to the end. I clicked place order. It said processing, and it said stock problems, out of stock. So everyone knows that feeling of where you're so close and then you miss out. And then I saw afterwards that stock was only 351 that released publicly, and I didn't see what the size distribution was per size, but I always generally assume that sizes are pretty low for 11 and a half and up. So I probably, if I was going for a size 10 or something, I probably would have got them. But what am I going to do with a size 10? I was looking for my size 12. I was kind of shocked that the numbers were so low. And so I started tweeting about this because I wanted to figure out why the stock numbers were so low. And, when after you miss out on a release, you're kind of annoyed too. So the things I said was, dropping 351 pairs to the public is very much part of the design of the shoe, just as what it looks like. And this is the case across the board for, like I mentioned on the Don Drew podcast, for the Off-White 4s. Those are designed to have only 50,000 pairs made. They're not made to have 350,000. But for, exclusive colorway, I figured that they would have the numbers bumped up to a bit to be 1,000, because I had that number of what they said Bodega had. Bodega was a collab, but this is an exclusive colorway, so that was the difference. And the other part was I said that it's kind of pointless promoting it all week and then just drop so few pairs. but when you do that, you do get that instant sellout. And there is a thing, you can't make 5,000 pairs and have it sit for a day and a half. That's not what retailers want. That's not what New Balance wants. They do want that instant sellout. So I started tweeting that I guess that they probably made 1,000 of these as well, because if they made 1,000 for Bodega, they maybe made 1,000 of these for Packer as well. And I was like, maybe half of them went to friends and family. Maybe some reason a photo shoot. Mike Packer's a made man in New York. He could sell them on StockX if he wants, but I didn't accuse him of that because I highly doubt he did that for this shoe. I made the comment that if I can sell half of my Sock Jig socks to friends and families, that he could do. So when I tweeted that, Andy Oliver of Shopify replied to me, and he said, "No chance would anyone buy 130K of inventory just to sell them as one-offs to friends. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, man." Which is a very good term. I gotta add that to my repertoire. And he said, this is a very key point that he said, that he's never heard of more than 100 pairs going to friends and family. And he said even that's pretty rare. That was pretty good insight from Andy Oliver, because, he works pretty closely with Kith. And if Kith doesn't have 100 pairs going to friends and family, then I doubt anyone else would. So I responded to Andy that, I trust your call on this, since he would have more insight into actual stock numbers instead of just guessing like I do. And I just said I was just drawing the conclusion with the publicly available information, going by that 1,000 pairs of Bodega and No Bad Days shoes. And then, I kind of came to this, I had this epiphany moment. I said, either way, the stock was so low, and I said, probably due to COVID affecting that NB1 factory. So after that is when I sent out my summary tweet, because I was replying to a couple of people. Jordan Kaiser, who actually took the photographs, which are awesome photographs, by the way. He replied to me as well, kind of, if someone has insight, they can't tell you stock numbers as well either. And I'm not going to ask him exactly either, because I know he can't say anything. But he came along the lines that he said some things along the lines that people usually don't know what's going on. And it's true. No one knows, because you can't say. So I sent out a summary tweet. I said, okay, maybe I overshot it a bit by saying stock was 1,000 for the shoe. So I said, okay, this is probably what happened. I said, New Balance approached its packer that will give you this 992 exclusive. They work on it together. They approached them back in January or even before. They started in January, designed it in that time frame. So I said, New Balance gets their new NB1 factory back up, but it's not running due to capacity. So I kind of jumped here. So I assumed that their factory is closed from, March to June or July. And then in June or so, they kicked it back up. But because it's got to, run under COVID restrictions at not a full capacity, that they cannot produce the same amount of pairs as if it was running, full blast. So I said, therefore, going by what Andy had told me, that friends and family pairs are 100 max. So I said, therefore, New Balance produces maybe 450 pairs. And then I said, Packer gives maybe 50 to 100 to friends and family, and then 351 released to the public. That 351 number is from monitors, and that is usually pretty accurate. The number that went to friends and family, no one knows. Only those guys know. But that's how I came to that conclusion, that that's how many were made. And then Brendan Dunn of Complex replied to me with just one word. He just said, nope. But he didn't elaborate. And, I'm assuming he just means that there's more to it than what I said. But I had sent out a qualifying tweet after that follow-up that I'm not sure if Brendan Dunn had even seen. And I said, the summary of what I said is probably the gist of what happened, even if the numbers aren't accurate. I know that the more goes into exclusive collabs and how many they get and how they're made. But I said, I'm sure that the NB1 factory and COVID came into play here, because I just don't see how it could not come into play. So, in conclusion, I think, New Balance came up to Packer back in January and designed it together. And then when COVID hit, that probably took a hit in what they had planned. And then when they got the NB1 factory back up, they kind of had to adjust plans. They could have maybe, one of the options is they probably could have delayed the release and done it later, but you have a full release calendar already. So this is your window and this is what you can release. And New Balance probably said to Packer, this is how many pairs you got. You get, 350, 400 pairs. Release them. And what's Packer going to say? They're going to say, of course, we'll do it. Let's go. So I don't blame Packer. I don't really actually blame New Balance now either once you kind of, think through all this. But, when your initial reaction is kind of like, what the hell? What's going on? 351 pairs? Why? But Packer can't say, this is how many we have. New Balance is not going to say that because that's their, secret sauce. They don't want to say how exactly who's getting what and how much. Because the game is the game. They want people guessing. They want people to keep trying. And this is kind of why I started this podcast, because I can get to this kind of stuff and kind of logically draw to a conclusion that I think is pretty accurate. I'm not privy to information from brands or companies, so they're not telling me things that I can't say. So I can say what I logically conclude. And I'm not Brendan Dunn. I don't have insights from interviews and other people's industry people either. So even if he does know the answer, he probably can't respond other than what he already said in the podcast. And what he replied to me is just nope. So I hope to give you a little bit more insight than just nope. The other drop I wanted to talk about was the Cactus Plant Flea Market Air Force One drop. This was announced on their Instagram for September 10th. The day was announced, but the time was not. They ended up shock dropping on the Cactus Plant site only and not on Nike at around 9 a.m. PST. I was out at the time when I got the alert on my phone, so I was able to cop. I saw later that a lot of people were able to cop, and I was like, good, they finally got this release right, because they totally botched it. Nike totally botched it, that is, when they dropped it on Nike ID. And so there was finally retribution. People finally got their pairs, or did they? And then waves after waves after waves of cancels came. Everyone got canceled. But what I noticed from Twitter was that it was mostly the white pairs that got canceled. The group AM Notify said that stock was around 8,000, probably combined, and that they had oversold by 7,000. So that makes me think that stock was really probably about 1,000, maybe 500 each. And like I said, from what I saw, it was only the white pairs that got canceled, and so the black pairs are fine. So how did that happen? How did it all go wrong? I can give some insights here just from using the Shopify admin interface myself. Basically, the Shopify system cannot oversell a product. The main person to blame is usually the merchant and how they've configured the product. The number one, most obvious one is the inventory was set wrong. So for the white pairs, if stock was really only 500, they could have misconfigured it and set it as 7,500. And then when they realized their mistake, they had to go back and start canceling all those orders. The other possibility is there's an option in Shopify when you're setting up for your product that you can check a check mark called continue selling when out of stock. This is usually not for hard goods, but for digital downloads or other things like that, or say paper cards, some things you can easily replicate. This happened recently where Dreamtown shoes sold hundreds and hundreds of, I think it was like Tokyo AJ1s, when they really probably only had 20. There was people who thought they were finally got their pairs, and then cancels after cancels came. In that case, same thing. They tried to blame Shopify as something that went wrong, but really it was they accidentally checked that checkbox, and the system kept selling because you told the system to keep selling. These kind of mistakes can actually cost merchants a lot of money, and that's based on how they process payments within Shopify. There's a couple options for payment processors. The main one is using Shopify payments, and in Cactus Plant case, they actually use PayPal. So there's third-party processors as well. For the Shopify payment processing, there's actually two options then to capture the payments, automatic and manual. The automatic payment capture is going to be used by all the big stores because they have a high volume of orders, and it will process the payment, go through the card right away. For manual, an admin for the Shopify interface has to go in through every order and actually click a button that says capture payments. And there's some tools in there where you can like multi-select a whole bunch of orders and then click capture payment. For smaller stores, it's probably a way better idea to have it set to manual. And you can even, do it a couple hours later. That way, if people do email you right away to say, hey, I would like to cancel this order, you can go in because you have not actually taken that money until you click capture payment. You can then cancel that person's orders and not be charged the 2.9 processing fee. But, a lot of the stores usually have no refunds, no cancel orders anyways. But technically, if they did it this way, they could do it and not lose any money. In the Cactus Plant case, they actually use PayPal for this. So they're not susceptible to this. So they probably could have canceled and not be charged. The third reason why they probably canceled is they went through and canceled duplicate orders. Maybe they went through all the orders and looked for dupes. The easiest way in Shopify to do that is when you see an order, you see the customer's name there on the side, and you'll see an item underneath that says the number of order that they've placed. And you can just click that number, and then it'll filter all the orders that this person has done. So if they see someone who only has one order in the system, they probably think, hey, this is a unique person. This is their first order. But if they saw someone that has 10 orders, they could click that 10. And if you have a history with Cactus Plant and you bought hoodies and tees and stuff like that, those would all show. But if you bought 4 pairs of Air Force Ones, they would all show right there. All with the same information, they would all show right there. So they can then pick off those orders easily and cancel them. That is the easiest default way in Shopify to look for duplicate orders. There could be other filters and add-ons that merchants use, but overall, I think merchants get lazy when it comes to canceling. You see this in bot orders too. They don't want to filter through hundreds and hundreds of orders. So overall, it's usually the merchants that are to blame. They're the ones who configure the product. They're the ones who can set when it sells out or if it should continue to sell even after sold out, even if publicly they do not take the blame. So that's it for episode 1. Thanks for listening. Like I said, this will probably be my worst episode. It'll get better from here. We'll figure it out. We'll stay in our lane. We'll do our reps. We'll see you next time.